Hi everyone, Velvet here, and I have some stories for you today. But before we get started, can you please do me a huge favor and like, comment, and subscribe? It'll really help the channel out, and it'll get you more videos like this every day. Let's get started. And our first one comes from the TEWBY. I left behind a dead man's switch in the company's workflow when I sensed I was about to be bullied into quitting. First of all, the story's a bit older, but I'll keep stuff rather ambiguous at times just for my own safety. I don't know how much my company can find out. I hope I can put it into words so everyone understands, especially as English is not my first language. Also, there will be a TLDR at the bottom. Also, there are some Google translations in these, so please be merciful. So, let's get started. I started working in logistics at a company that builds things. That was just as the COOF was starting actually. When I started, we were 5 people in the team, but one of the guys quit soon after. This is important because it was a very good insight into how my department operates. When they don't need or want a certain someone around, they will not outright fire you, since they have to pay you a severance, but instead they will bully you into quitting. I saw pretty much the whole package, excluding them from meetings and important events, putting them down in public, lecturing them, never noticing the good work done, but always making sure everyone knows about the work that is poorly done, drowning someone in work and then berating them when they inevitably can't keep up. It was an outright childish at times. I didn't register it at the time, but it was really valuable lesson for later. I was put in charge of managing our overseas suppliers. Among other things, about half of our material came from overseas. Most of that from China. While it seems like a big task for someone new, it wasn't done out of malice. Generally everyone believed we were going to get a guy in China for the Chinese supplies, then I'd be left for a handful of others. It seemed fair. But we never got that guy for China, and I was left with all the overseas suppliers. Another important thing is that just in this project the company had decided to change the workflow for overseas suppliers. This is because due to the COOF, the price of shipping containers had exploded. To explain it simply as possible, previously, the suppliers were responsible for filling our containers and bringing them to the harbor. We were responsible for picking them up from the harbor and bringing them to us. However, due to the demands and many other things, sometimes we just needed 2 or 3 pallets of parts. There were a dozen or more that could fit inside the container, so we were shipping a lot of air. The new workflow would have the suppliers bring the parts to an external warehouse, one in the US and one in China. Then, we would load them into containers to get the containers as full as possible, and then bring them to the harbor and then into our plant. This way, we needed to rent fewer containers. This complicated things, because it erased the direct contact from us to the suppliers, and there was no official method on how we were going to keep it in contact with suppliers, tell them how many parts we needed, how to package them, if there are any changes requested, etc., etc. During that time, I was left mostly alone to deal with it, and I set up a system with Excel. It was mostly manual, rather simple, but it worked well. It worked so well that one of the suits even chatted with me about it for a bit since he wanted to make it a standard in future projects. And also, this is very important. I was the only person who actually knew all the overseas suppliers and their contacts. Some of you might be able to tell where this story is going already. So, during that time, nobody had actually bothered to ask me to explain to them how my system worked. And where I kept track of all the supplier contacts, all of this data was hidden on like a slide of 800 of some Excel file. I had saved in a folder titled Part Pictures, which was otherwise filled with pictures of parts. Now, moving forward, as the COOF began dying down, the department for whatever reason decided they don't need me anymore. I have theories, but nothing is certain, so I'll just leave it at that. I pretty much saw precisely the same thing go down as I had seen with the other one guy who had left shortly after I started. All the bullying. I thought to myself at first that if I pull through and keep doing a good job, and I believe I did a good job, they would eventually cool down. But they didn't. After 2 months of that, I said F it and decided to just sit out and endure until the Christmas bonus that we get every year. And then hand in my notice. And also, I just delayed teaching anyone how my system worked until I was gone. And that's pretty much how it happened. Off topic, for my own future employment, I actually lucked out. One of the local suppliers I was managing had a really chill guy as the managing director. I gave him a call, explained that I was about to be unemployed, and asked if they needed staff. He then called me into an interview. We talked about anime for an hour while his HR lady looked really confused about what Attack on Titan was. And he told me I could come in the moment I'm done with my, then current job. Back on topic, a month into working at my new job, I got a call from my old job. The department manager, to his credit, he was always a reasonable guy. He told me in plain words that they have no idea where the F to even start with the Chinese suppliers. He then offered me my old job back, with a very respectable pay increase. I explained that I already had a new job. 2 days later, I got another call where the same manager offered me many times my monthly salary just to come in for 1 week, and instruct my whole team in how my process functioned, introduced him to all contacts, etc., etc. I told him that I refused because of the way I had been treated by them when I worked there. He said that he understood, and wished me luck at my new job, and hung up. The reason I'm writing this story now, this week I randomly got in touch with some of the people in the transport department of my old job. They mentioned that in the now 10 months since I left, the logistics department racked up an 8-figure losses due to the wrong deliveries, over and under deliveries, outdated parts, and suppliers canceling their contracts, and new suppliers needing to be sourced, etc., etc. And all the blame for that fell on my old team. My new job is fine. It's not the best job, but I get to travel a lot and get nice bonuses for it. My boss isn't around much since he's married, and I do sometimes regret not taking the offer for a week as an instructor. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed the read. TLDR, company put me in charge of managing overseas suppliers, unintentionally making me the only guy who knew the suppliers, and knew the system I had created to exchange data with them. When my company started bullying me into quitting, I avoided instructing anyone from my team in how the system worked, leading them to ask me to come back after I quit, and then racking up 8-figure losses after I refused to come back. And our next one comes from Lone Ranger. Stepdad cheats on my mom, so we get revenge. Initials for clarity. Me, a 24-year-old male. Me, my mother, a 50-year-old female. Mom, my brother, a 23-year-old male. Bro, my sister, a 30-year-old female. Sis is cheating stepdad, a 45-year-old male. Chris's stepdad's co-worker, a 25-year-old female. Betty, the other woman, a 40-year-old female. Darla. This might be a long one. Apologize in advance. I moved in with my mom after her marriage of 25 years with my bio dad was ended. He was a manipulative beehole, but that's another story. Shortly after the divorce, my mom introduced me to her boyfriend at the time, Chris. Now my mom worked as a correctional officer at the county jail. The boyfriend was a former inmate in for a DUI. That should have been the first red flag, but my mom was grieving a long marriage. And I didn't want to push the subject. Chris seemed to make her happy, and that was enough for me. Me, bro, and sis all moved in with mom and Chris. We seemed to get along okay. Chris and I bonded a bit over our love of video games, and all seemed well. This is until 2017. Due to Chris's prior DUI, he had to go in regularly for probationary checkups at the courthouse. One day, he didn't return, and we got a little worried. We then received a phone call from him from Texas. Turns out when he arrived at the courthouse that day, he was jumped by the FBI. His family from Texas was implicated on a number of gang and drug-related crimes. And due to a situation where he was left in a vehicle during a drug handoff, he was on the hook as well. He ended up agreeing to testify against his family members in exchange for a shorter sentence, and allowed to be out of the prison before the trial. My mom was distraught, and over the course of many phone calls, over a year, they worked out their marriage plans when he returned. His store owner at the DQ he worked at allowed him to come back as well, back to his store manager position. Soon after, the drinking started. Now, obviously, because of his DUI, Chris was clearly no stranger to drinking. He began to drink more and more, to the point where he was consuming half a 24-pack of beer a day. Chris was a mean drunk. He regularly started fights when wasted, and while never got physical, he wasn't exactly kind with his words. My mom enabled his behavior for several years, saying the stress was getting from him from work and from the upcoming trial. Finally, after several years, my mom had enough. Chris came home extremely drunk one night, and my mom confronted him. She asked if he had been drinking, and when he didn't deny it, she kicked him out. He went to live with a friend temporarily. The next morning, Mom asked us to help gather a few of his essentials so he didn't have to re-enter the home until he was sober. While we were gathering his things, we heard a knock at the front door. We opened it to find Betty, one of Chris's coworkers and someone I went to high school with. She told my mom she had something important to share. After sitting my mom down and telling her not to share where she got the info from, Betty told my mom about how Chris was cheating on my mom with Darla, how he regularly had Darla perform cheeky acts around his workplace, how Betty had caught them, and how Chris told her that if she ever told my mom, he'd fire her. He was the store manager, and finally, how Darla was pregnant. My mom was angry. After that initial shock wore off, she told him to round up all of Chris's things and to dump them outside. We took everything of his out of the house and tossed it in the alley behind our house. Chris had no reason or ability to return to the house. It was rented with only my mom on the paperwork, so no issues there. In the meantime, she called and confronted him. He confessed to the entire affair, and that he was happy Darla was pregnant, because that meant he'd finally have a child of his own. Mom refused to have more kids. We threw her massive strains on her body. Likely she wouldn't survive anymore. He refused to apologize for any of his actions. My mom arranged for him to collect his items from the alley, with an officer present, and he left our lives. Now, the revenge. Now, my mom clearly wanted to dust her hands of him and move on. She was already quite emotional from the whole ordeal, and wanted nothing more from him. But Sis Bro and I had other ideas. First, we called his workplace. Dairy Queen operates as an independently owned franchise, and the owner of this branch owns several branches in the area. He was also a good friend. We informed him of the sensual acts being performed on the premises, and he went through the process of getting Chris booted from his position and barred him from any branches in the area. Funnily, Betty got his position after he left and now runs a tight, clean ship. Chris no longer had a job or a place to live, and went to live with Darla in the town about an hour away. We found out that he started working at another DQ in that town, and informed the owner of that location of the situation. It took significantly longer, due to there being no current indecent actions occurring there, but eventually he lost that job too. Soon after, Chris began driving around our neighborhood, seemingly stalking my mom and our family, probably because of his joblessness now. Due to the whole situation in Texas, he never had his probation lifted for his DUI, thus still did not have a license. He never had to drive when he lived with us, since work was local and we could drive him as needed, but there he was, clearly driving around by himself when he shouldn't be. We contacted the police and informed them about Darla's vehicle in our neighborhood and that we believe Chris was driving it without a license. We told them to pull over the vehicle next time they see it, as they would likely be seen driving again. Sure enough, a few weeks later, we were told that Chris was indeed pulled over and sent back to the local jail for driving without a license and while intoxicated. The police also did a search of the home he was staying at and found several guns on the premises. Since he was a felon, he was not legally allowed to have weaponry on the premises, meaning there was more jail time tacked on. By the time his jail time had finished, it was just in time for him to be sent back to incarceration in Texas for the trial. Chris's son was born while Chris was in prison. Darla evidently realized what an absolute prick Chris was and cut ties with him while he was in prison. During his prison time, Chris started sending tons of letters to my mom, stating how sorry he was, pleading to take him back, and ranting about how it wasn't his fault. All the time, the same letter, mind you. Mom burnt every one of them. We moved on, moving out of state. Chris eventually got out of prison some years ago, and now lives in Kansas, struggling to fight child support, which Darla sued him for. Mom now has a new boyfriend, who treats her right and cares a lot more than Chris ever did. Bro and Sis moved out. And I still live with Mom, assisting her with a newly purchased home that we've been renovating. Life's looking okay. I remembered all of this today by a chat with a coworker about cheaters, and thought to post it here for others to enjoy. And our final one comes from Crazy Mastiff. Today I effed up by being a beehole on the internet and causing a stranger to get divorced. I'm cross-posting this from Today I effed up. I'm really not a mean person, and generally feel terrible for destroying a marriage. But the lovely users thought I should post it here, for a laugh. I didn't mean for the revenge to go to this level by any means. I don't even know if I meant for revenge at all, but here we are. I, a 42-year-old female, Effed up big time. 2 weeks ago, on a random Thursday morning, at like 1 a.m., someone started shooting off fireworks in my neighborhood. I've been having bouts of insomnia and was finally able to get some sleep, and I had to wake up at 4 a.m. for a meeting 2 hours away that I had to be for at 8 a.m. I was pissed, so were my dogs. I love fireworks, but I think there's a time and a place. Thursday morning at 1 a.m. is not it. I posted to the neighborhood Facebook group a few hours later during a coffee break about people that set off fireworks at 1 a.m. midweek. After I made the long drive home, I checked my Facebook. Some guy comments that I can't sleep because I'm a fat pig. Now, I'm chubby, but not sloppy fat. Plus, I just lost the equivalent of a fully grown male wombat, or a 54 North American gray squirrels. So I feel effing awesome about myself. This is where I may have really effed up. I responded to the guy, who was maybe mid to late 30s, very early 40s, about the same age group as me. I write in the comment beneath his, "Listen, guy's name. I'm sorry I had to end things, but I just didn't have the same feelings. What you're saying now is just hurtful and mean. Please stop sending me messages and commenting on my Facebook post. It's just a pathetic way to contact me. I told you a dozen times already. We are done. It's over." The following day, I had to get to the airport for an out-of-country vacation that had me getting up early and leaving early as hell. So I didn't check my Facebook during all the craziness. Also because I'm only on it sparingly. I don't live on my phone, and when I am, I'm usually on Reddit or on TikTok versus Facebook. I could not check my Facebook even if I wanted. I was on a cruise, not paying $25 a day for internet, and the country we visited didn't really have the greatest Wi-Fi. Besides, I was having a blast, leaving the chaos of the world behind. I signed on Monday night, and apparently people took this seriously and told his wife. She was freaking out on me, pleading for information, sending me messages. Her and his friends were DMing me. He was DMing me. It was bad. The last message was the guy saying I'm a total see you next Tuesday because I refused to tell the truth and I just destroyed his life. I immediately messaged them both and his wife explaining what happened. I sent pics of me on vacation, even timestamped. Apparently, he's a serial cheater, and when I exposed our affair, another woman exposed her affair with the husband to his wife because, apparently, was jealous that he had yet another side chick. This was the straw that broke the camel's back, because not only of the multiple affairs, but because he humiliated her with how public it was, especially it being a neighborhood group. So there's my accidental pro-revenge. TLDR, someone tried to hurt my feelings after I posted about fireworks being set off early morning, and I pretended to publicly address our breakup. His wife and affair partner were not pleased. Whew, OP, this one was a doozy. And to think, all he had to do was not set off those fireworks, but it looks like it all exploded in his face. Whew. Thank you so much for staying with me to the end of this video. Can you please do what I said in the beginning and like, comment, and subscribe? It will really help the channel out, and it'll get you more videos like this every day. Velvet out.